Hi folks, Ryan Honeyman here from Lift Economy. Many folks have come to us over the last 10 years and asked, how do I get more involved in creating an economy that works for the benefit of all life? They also ask, what skills and experiences do I need to help make this transition? So 3 years ago, we created something called the Next Economy MBA to help address this and similar questions. Lift Economy's Next Economy MBA is an online course that's designed for entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, students, recent graduates, employees, and folks who want to learn more about transformational Next Economy strategies and businesses. Join the growing alumni network of nearly 250 alumni who've gone through this program and learned essential skills and hopefully built lifelong relationships for catalyzing businesses in the emergent and regenerative economy. So we encourage you to check out our course. You can go to lifteconomy.com/MBA. The next course, Cohort 7, starts on September 21st, 2021. So once again, go to www.lifteconomy.com/MBA. And now, on with the show. Welcome to Next Economy Now. The goal of this podcast series is to highlight the leaders who are taking a regenerative, bioregional, equitable, democratic, racially just, and whole systems approach to creating the new economy.
This is Kevin Bayuk, and I'm here with Kevin Egolf today. Thank you, Kevin, for making yourself available. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me on.
Super excited to talk to you because of some of the work you've been doing lately. But for the listeners who don't know you, maybe you could tell us a little bit about your story and how you got to your present work.
Sure. My story starts, first job out of school. For the longest time, I was generally interested in business and understanding what makes businesses work, why they're successful, why they're not, trying to sort of be involved in some kind of running of a business. And out of school, I was led towards finance and went into investment banking because I was told you get great experience and you learn a lot about how businesses operate. You get to work with a bunch of different managers and you also make a little bit of money, which helps. And so I went down that path and I did very traditional finance, investment banking, and private equity for about 8 years. And it's interesting. I was sitting at my desk at my employer, and this was about 6 years into my career. And I was just thinking to myself, if I'm still at this desk in 10 years, will I feel proud of what I accomplished? And the simple answer was no. There were definitely aspects of the job I liked. I liked the complexity of what I was doing. I liked working with smart people day in and day out across the management teams, the advisors we worked with. It was definitely very engaging, but ultimately I wasn't really passionate about the companies I was working for and the purpose of what I was doing. And so I really started to take a step back and think about what I was interested in and where I wanted to go. And I sort of had a 1.5-year transition from that point, venturing into things that I was more passionate about, very specifically sustainable agriculture, sustainable living, supporting small farmers. And ultimately, I left my job and I worked on a rooftop farm in New York City for a year. Very quickly realized I was not going to be a farmer myself, while I absolutely enjoyed it. Ideally, I'd love to have the job where you're behind the desk working hard mentally for a few hours and then out working hard physically, although I don't think those really exist. I found myself more gravitating towards how can I apply what I've learned to help these farmers. And I was very fortunate to come across a company called Iroquois Valley Farms, which is a farmland finance company providing mostly young farmers with land access across the U.S. And I've been working with them for about 4 years. Our focus there is helping mid-sized organic family farmers grow their business. And that was really my entry into what I call sustainable farmland finance, where I'm now squarely focused and really trying to ramp up my efforts across all range of producers.
Thank you, Kevin. Thanks for that story, and thanks for the courage to take the transition path to follow your kind of meaning and purpose. As you've learned more about kind of the circumstance of American agriculture or agriculture at large. I'm curious if you want to share with our listeners some of the things that stand out for you about the state of agricultural finance, the state of farmers in this country, things that motivate some of the work that you're doing.
Yeah, that's too big of a question to tackle on this call. I'm not an expert on all things agriculture. Obviously, my job is squarely focused there, and I follow a lot what's going on. But I'm not in the weeds of the politics, so my perspective is from a high level. But really, you see right now, agriculture is squarely focused on supporting still big farmers. So many years ago, the mantra was "get big or get out," and for the most part, that is still happening broadly across agriculture in the U.S. and that's led by a push of land grant universities, which are very focused on what I'll call this prescriptive agriculture model, where you're following, here are the inputs, here's what you get. And then the older generation of farmers that have developed that system over the last 20 plus years very excessively, and just the systems and infrastructure in place to support that system. So that's still very much leading the push in agriculture, but luckily there's pockets of organizations, people, and groups more focused on a different set of agricultural parameters, ones that are focused on the health of the farmers and the soil and the planet, the health of the food that they're eating, and really looking at this as a holistic picture, because chemical agriculture is not the solution, despite what many people tout within the industry. Small farms, sustainable farms, they can feed the world, and there's a transition being led largely by the consumers to make that happen.
I appreciate that perspective, and that's the right kind of high level. I think that's important for context. One of those pockets might be the slow money movement. Did you get involved with the New York kind of slow money community?
Yeah, so one of the newer ventures that we launched, Local Farms Fund, which is actually been around for a couple of years, was started as a collaboration with Slow Money New York City. And the Slow Money New York City folks were extremely influential on the development of Local Farms Fund. And it was really taking the Iroquois Valley Farms model, which is focused on more what we call the mid-sized producers, to the smaller, earlier stage farmers. We applied a lot of slow money principles. Bringing money down to earth is a common tag phrase people might have heard. Invest locally. Slow money is really really focused on supporting local businesses and driving a local economy, and the benefits that come from that around money staying locally and not going to international or large national corporate interests, higher wages, middle incomes earned by these small businesses, and all those benefits. So that was really what helped get Local Farms Fund going a couple of years ago.
Can you describe the premise of Local Farms Fund in more detail, and specifically what makes it different, or I think unique? Here at Lift Economy, we've been tracking kind of your work there with great admiration.
Yeah.
So I'm curious if you could just describe the parameters that make it so rare.
So there's a few things that we really wanted to focus on. One was finding a way to support smaller farmers and early stage farmers that generally, if you think about investing and trying to make an investment return, which is what you're trying to do on an investment, it's hard to do it on a small scale because there's costs, whether that's time costs or actual physical costs associated with making an investment, doing the work around it, managing it. And that's why you generally see investments being very large, moving upscale, and you see the mergers and all this because it's easier to move capital in big chunks. It's more, quote unquote, efficient. Local Farms Fund realized, well, if that's happening on the farm scale, that's only going to continue to lead to the get big or get out strategy within agriculture. And we really wanted to focus on the smaller farmers. So we created a fund that said, we're just going to work with these smaller farmers. And there's some trade-offs that everyone has to make. The investment returns, because there's a little more cost for each investment dollar, are a little bit lower. So the investors need to realize that there's an intangible value to their investment. They're not going to get rich. They should get a modest return and know that they are supporting their local farmers. So that was one of the big things that we needed to focus on, is expectations of what an investment return should be, both on a financial and a non-financial basis. The other, important things that we wanted to do was realize that Local Farms Fund was going to target a wide variety of investors. So most of the time, you might be familiar that private investments are generally only available to what I'll call the high net worth individuals. And we really wanted to make a private investment that was open to more people. So we did a special type of offering which allows anyone to invest in the New York City tri-state area. And there's a lot of different, I'm not going to go into them, SEC regulations around that, but we used a much lesser known offering option to do that. So that was really important. That's one of the slow money principles is finding how to make more investment options, local investment options to more people. So that was important. The other thing was really having a good governance structure and using a structure that is more democratic, that takes into account a lot of different stakeholders. So one of the things that we did was it's one investor, one vote. So it doesn't matter if you're the largest investor or you're the smallest investor, you have the same say. Everyone invests based on what's they can do and what's important for them, and that shouldn't affect their voice and how things go. So we wanted that to be democratic. Within our governance documents, we clearly state we're considering all stakeholders. So the board, it is board managed, has that as their mandate, is considering all the stakeholders, which includes the farmers, the people that surround the farms, the people that eat the food from the farms, the environment, all the things you'd want to consider from a holistic investment perspective. And then the final thing was we put a farmer seat. So the farmers actually elect one of the board members. It has nothing to do with the investors or the process. They elect, and it can be one of them. It can be someone that they appoint outside, and that person is very specifically supposed to represent the farmer's voice on the board. I think that's important because we are directly working with these farmers in our model. So they should be heard at the board level and at the discussions that are impacting what's going to happen with the fund.
Great. And if you don't mind, I might have some specific questions about each of those aspects. So let's say first, focusing on small farmers who are largely cut out of the capital stack for financing of agriculture activities in North America. What might be the typical farm size that Local Farms Fund might fund? What about things like track record or age, experience, these kind of things? Curious if you could comment on the archetype, or even, I know at least one investment has been made. Maybe you could kind of give us some parameters of what that looked like.
Yeah, well, the more you dig into agriculture, you more to realize there is no one size fits all in terms of a farm, and that's from a variety of standpoints. One is the geographic location and the limitations on the amount of land, the type of operation that farmer might be doing. So we are focused in the New York tri-state area with an emphasis on the Hudson Valley, which is generally going to lead to a certain type of farm versus if you were to go further out in the Northeast or the Midwest, those farms would look different. So, an average farm for us is probably going to be in the long term from about 10 acres to 100 acres. The two investments we've done, one was 63 acres, the other one was 27. So what right in those ranges. Both of those farms had significant forest land, so that's not the productive acreage. Both of them probably have about half of that in terms of direct productive acres. Although the more advanced farmers find ways to use the woodlands productively and sustainably, and that becomes part of their operation. But it's not going to have the same output as a big open field might have. In terms of the farmer, what we very specifically wanted to do at Local Farms Fund was not age discriminate. So while we're probably going to work with younger farmers, what our stated goal is to work with early stage farmers. And we had a lot of discussion internally when we were creating that. What we define that for us is someone who plans on farming for the next 20 years. We said that's a parameter. They're going to be farming for 20 years. Doesn't matter where they are in their cycle. They're still early. Right, 20 years is a long time. It's a lot of seasons. Granted, there are some farmers that might farm for 60 seasons, but those are few and far between. Sort of probably an average farmer is going to go anywhere from 30 to 50 seasons. So 20 is still relatively early in that. They're having 20 left is still relatively early in their farming career. So and then the type of operation is largely going to be led by the farmers. We want to work with someone who farms quote unquote sustainably, and that very specifically is not defined. We let the farmer define that, and it's up to us to say this, from a board perspective, this fits what we think is important, what we think the investors want to see, and the type of operation. Obviously, there are certain things which, are very quickly going to be crossed off from not being sustainable, but the exact methodology and certifications that they choose is going to be dependent on the farmer. We really want to work with the farmer in a way that the farmer wants to work. We don't want to tell them, here's what you need to do, here's how to do it. You want them to leverage their experience and their knowledge to manage the farm the best way that they see fit. Perfect.
Can you also describe a little bit about what the terms might look like archetypally? Again, there's 2 investments already, but is it kind of obviously you're saying there's some customization per each opportunity, which makes perfect sense. That's the reality of partnering with land and biology and humans is we got to customize it to place-based, site-specific opportunities. But what might be normal in terms of that terms? Like, does the fund acquire land? If you could just kind of describe what it might look like and what it looks like from the farmer's perspective and what it looks like from the fund's perspective.
So one of the things that we took from the Iroquois Valley Farms model was that we don't want to be land speculators. We don't want to say, here's a good property for a good price, and here's the type of operation that should be used to maximize the potential of a given farm. We are focused on finding farmers that are talented, that want to have a successful farm operation, and working with them to find land opportunities that fits their long-term vision. So our investment model is farmer first, in the sense that the farmers are going to come to us. We're going to do our work on those farmers, make sure we're comfortable with them as entrepreneurs, as farm managers, as producers, and as capable partners, rather than, and then, find the farm property that suits their needs. So generally they're bringing us the opportunity. Obviously from an investment perspective, we are buying the land. So therefore we need to make sure we're buying at a fair and economic price from the investor's side. But more importantly is making sure that we're working with the right farmer. So our model is finding those farmers and then finding the land. Local Farms Fund buys the property and gives those farmers a lease to own arrangement on that. So it's a long-term lease. It's a 20-year lease with a purchase option that kicks in after year 5. From the investment perspective, ideally, we'd like each farmer that we work with to purchase the property within 5 to 10 years. But we very specifically noted that it can take time for farmers to develop their business. We don't want to say here, although we want our money back in 10 years, ideally, we don't want to say that's the absolute time limit. So we said, well, let's just set up a 20-year lease and try and facilitate everything we can so that they can purchase the property from us in 5 to 10 years. And so, that lease structure is very important. It gives the farmers a long window. The purchase option is essentially at our purchase cost, which cost plus a below inflationary escalation that is designed to give the investors a little bit more return for the risk they're taking, but also give the farmers incentive to staying on and being able to purchase the property, since they should get it at a below market value whenever they exercise their purchase option. So we thought that was a fair way to set things up. And we're about 3 years into our first investment, just over a year, or I guess it would be 2.5 years on our first investment and a little over a year on our first investment. We're working with 3 other farmers right now, developing those investment opportunities for the fund.
Excellent. And so to recapitulate, from the farmer's perspective, they get a lease terms that are more favorable than is normal for most small farmers, and the actual lease rate is likely to be below market, but their purchase opportunity certainly would be below market value for the land if they exercise that opportunity. The investors are getting a modest return with kind of patient ethic in terms of how they're approaching it, but there is a possibility for kind of liquidity in a 10-year kind of time frame as well.
Yeah, with each investment, once that property is sold, that money would be returned to the investors. And so, it's not going to be one lump sum at the end of 10 years. It's probably not going to be one lump sum in 5 years. It's going to be, they will get annual distributions relating to their investment, but sort of the main return will happen when the farm is sold, and that's going to be in for each investment, probably 5 to 12 years, in that range.
Wonderful. Okay. And so the second aspect that you mentioned earlier, the retail kind of investor. So what's the minimum that somebody can participate in the fund? What's the minimum that an investor would?
Right now, the minimum investment is $10,000. Well, that's our stated minimum. We have accepted and will accept lower investments on circumstances, but for a variety of reasons, it's better to advertise a slightly higher price if that price is reasonable for an individual. We obviously want to get that lower. The fund is completely self-managed. We don't have a third-party administrator, which keeps upfront costs down, but also adds a little more administrative costs for each investor. So that was sort of where the $10,000 minimum came in from. We want to see that get lower, and that probably will over time as these structures become more efficient and as folks get better at administrating them and other administrative options come forward. So that's something we definitely want to improve on, but it's vastly different from a lot of other private investments where 6 digits would probably be the normal minimum, if not even higher. So there's very few that have this local of an impact, this direct of an impact, at that level.
And thank you. And then the governance piece as well, giving farmers a voice at the table, which is so uncommon in most agricultural finance. What are some of the already in the structuring, there's been some decisions made which already are indicative of the importance of that seat at the table. But in terms of governance, what are some of the decisions you could imagine happening in the future where the structure you've created could be beneficial?
Obviously it's hard to predict the future. I think the most important thing, we've created the outline of what the fund is supposed to do and how it's supposed to work. And right now, knock on wood, things are going well, progressing smoothly. Assuming though that stays the course, hopefully there won't really be any big issues that come up. But if something does come up, that requires the fund to make a big decision or change the direction, you want everyone to have a voice, and that could be to liquidate the fund early for whatever reason, change the investment capital, both returns or parameters, and if you think about, and I'm a finance background, so I go into this too much a little bit, but the structure of capital inherently alters the way businesses operate. And so if you're changing that, you may change ultimately how it operates. And, so those are important decisions. If a certain farmer is struggling, I think having another farmer there and providing that perspective and providing guidance to the board on what the right decision is extremely, extremely important and valuable. Again, knock on wood, and so far no problems. But we want to be a fund that's supportive of the farmer and that helps them in times when times aren't going well. But how much help and how long is a very, very tough question that having a farmer representative there will be extremely helpful if we have to go down that route. And and that's what you want. You want this to be a collaboration. Ultimately, if it doesn't work for the farmer, one of the great things is it's a lease. They can walk away from it. There's very little repercussions. That's the hardest thing about getting going in farming is you're creating a place-based business. And most of the time, farmers, if they don't have a lot of money, which is the instance when they'd be seeking some kind of alternative partner, they're stuck leasing a property. And those leases can be unsustainable. They can be of short durations. If you think about building a business that you intend to run for 40 plus years, how can you be unsure of where you're going to operate, especially when you're putting so much time and effort into developing soil health and systems for a particular property? One of the farmers that we're working with right now, him and his wife have been sort of farming for about 5-6 years on their own. They're already on their third property. And each time they get to a new property, they have to change their systems. They got to develop the soil health, get rid of that weed bank. And it's a lot of work. And they're not necessarily getting rewarded for that work until they are able to find a place that they can take ownership. So having that lease where they aren't investing all the capital like they would in a purchase, but being able to take ownership in the future, knowing that it's long term, is extremely valuable for their business and their ability to long term successfully operate.
You got it. That's so critical. I mean, some of the young farmers, so many of the beginning farmers that we work with, whatever their age, encounter this phenomenon of short-term, very onerous leases, which makes some of the practices that they're most inspired about, perennial polyculture, vegetation regimes, and so forth, just basically impossible. If your fruit trees take 6 years to bear and you have a 4-year lease, and the market values of land are dynamic in an area like California or Hudson Valley, it makes it extraordinarily challenging to start an operation that is able to prioritize best impacts for the earth and to be providing living wages for families and workers. So I think this model is I'm extraordinarily bullish on the importance of this model. And at Lift Economy, we always are looking for these models that can be theoretically regionally replicated. In my mind's eye, I can't help but imagine every community having something like a local farms fund with a broad participation base, so that you don't have to be a accredited high net worth individual to participate, where the transaction costs have been brought to whatever is reasonable, as minimal as possible. But the structure is designed for a modest and patient return on capital, but enabling great outcomes for the land, for food health, for soil health, and for worker health and for labor. And this is one of the best models I think we've seen. What do you imagine? How do you imagine? I mean, so 2 investments are great. The early days, I get it, but it's really, really important pioneering work. So let's imagine we continue to have success with Local Farms Fund, and we get to celebrate that. What can you imagine? How would you imagine this? Do you see this possibility of a regional kind of replication?
Absolutely. One of the things that was important for us was trying to set things up in a low cost manner, so that it's, we're not required to raise a lot of money, invest a lot of money to make things work. And, we're making things work with 2 investments, and the 3rd and 4th will make things easier as well. But it's not many people have gone down this path in terms of non-accredited investment offerings, which is that anyone can invest, not just the high net worth individuals. Community-based, something that's very tangible. There's obviously several great ways that you can invest in your community, but they're not necessarily as tangible. It's harder to follow, whether it's the local CDFIs or cooperative investment funds that give loans locally, and those are all great, and everyone should have some of those in their portfolio. But they're still a little bit further removed. We wanted this to be very tangible for the investor base. We wanted them to feel like it's a community. The 2 farmers that we've worked with right now, they're very welcoming of the investors. We've had retreats there, and we'll continue to have that. They understand the importance of the investor base to their security and their land access. And you want to continue to enhance and develop the concept of investing in your community and what that means, and the values that creates for everyone.
Just really excellent work. And it would tessellate really well with just other models that we're seeing emerging with multi-stakeholder cooperative farms, with land trusts that are also community owned, for alternative ownerships besides family owned farms. The fund itself could be inclusive of those other pieces where they exist. And so this idea of transforming the land tenure system that's favorable to smaller farmers, producing locally, distributing locally, and kind of owned literally in collaboration with the community that's being served, is the pathway that we see as indicative of the next economy. And this piece that you've created and really bootstrapped it for Next Economy Now listeners, I just want to highlight that putting something like this together takes a lot of work. And there are sometimes soul-crushing documentation around SEC regulations and other things to read through, which just a lot of reading and study and diligence. And Kevin, my understanding, has done this, basically bootstrap this. I mean, I think there were some collaborators and so forth, but it's just a lot of work. And because you're trying to do something that's favorable to the farmers in terms of the terms you're offering, there's not necessarily immediate reciprocity for that work. So I just want to highlight for everybody that Kevin has done something extraordinary here, and it's very, very important. So I'm super, super grateful for your work, Kevin. And I'm wondering if there's anything else you want to share that you want Next Economy Now listeners to be aware of as we move forward in support of work like the Local Farms Fund.
Yeah, I mean, Kevin, thank you so much for all those kind words. And I have put a lot of time into this, and I'm happy that I have done so, but I could not have done it without, other co-collaborators. I was very fortunate to, like I said, collaborate with Slow Money New York City, and those investors, the way we structured it, just to give everyone an example, and I think this is important if you're thinking about doing something about establishing a community investment fund, but we brought together, and we call ourselves all co-founders, but about 10 co-founders, and they each individually put in a little bit of the seed capital money. And that from the get-go really decreased the risk of any given person. The management company, Working Farms Capital, we put in the most, obviously, and these people also gave a commitment to invest more once everything was established. And so we were very lucky that we're able to do everything actually under budget from what we put together. But I think it helps having a group, and each person has a different role in that group, and you obviously need someone that's going to take the lead of various aspects. But it's community investing, so it shouldn't be started by one person and then coalescing a community. You should coalesce the community to start, and then figure out what you want to do. And we were lucky that it's worked out that way with Local Farms Fund. So, if there's something that's really interesting and you can coalesce a group and each person can put a little together, that might be enough to get things started. And it doesn't make one person have to bear all the risk, all the time, and deal with all the different things that went on. For us, it's very important to set this up in a way that worked for the farmers, that worked for the investors. And each of those co-founders brought their viewpoint, and some of them did more of the heavy lifting than others. But we interviewed probably 10 to 15 different people on our structure and on our lease terms and all these different things to make sure that it was going to be set up properly, and that it was going to work for the farmers, and that it is going to work for the investors. So, and I think this is how a lot of cooperatives get started. So, yeah, bring the community together and then figure out what you can create. And sometimes that can be more effective. And, that's really what we've done at Local Farms Fund here.
Indeed. And having cut that pathway will make it so much easier for others to follow. And I agree that the communities will be getting together. But now there's some prior art of very inspiring models, amongst others, that we can borrow from, shortcut and save time and energy and just be more efficient in following that path, which I suspect will happen. So maybe I know your time is highly subscribed, but I suspect some listeners might get excited about this model, kind of convene a group in their community, their region. Should they reach out to you? We at Lift Economy, we can also act as an intermediary and make introductions.
Yeah, I mean, they can, anyone that wants to learn a little more, we got the basics up on the website, www.localfarmsfund.com. There's a contact email on that website. I'll give it here as well, but sometimes it's easier just to find it on the web page. But it's LFF, Larry Frank at localfarmsfund.com. And that goes directly to me. And then, reach out to other people doing similar things. I think we all realize that the end goal here is to create something successful, both on an individual basis, whatever the project is, but also on a broad spectrum basis, and increase the amount of people focused on community investing and supporting the local economy, the next economy, and together that's going to make everyone more successful. So, and I know we are not necessarily a cooperative. We have a lot of cooperative principles in our governance documents, but that's really the cooperative mindset is supporting others in similar ventures and ideas. And we're taking that same approach. So happy to to chat with people, share resources, extend my knowledge as much as I can.
Really excellent, Kevin. So grateful for you making time today, and we look forward to following Local Farms Fund and celebrating all the many successes to come in all your further ventures as well.
Next Economy Now is a production of Lift Economy. To listen to all of our episodes, go to lifteconomy.com/podcast. That's LIFT economy.com/podcast. You can also sign up for our monthly newsletter at lifteconomy.com/newsletter. Please also rate and review our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.